The first time I saw him, his face was pressed against the living room window. His forehead touched the glass, his eyes were wide open, and he was smiling directly at me. For 2 or 3 seconds, neither of us moved. I sat frozen on the couch, staring at this pale face floating in the darkness outside. Then he slowly raised one finger to his lips, like he was telling me not to scream. I jumped up so fast I nearly fell over the coffee table and slammed my hand against the light switch. The backyard flooded with light. He was gone. But when I stepped closer to the window, I saw a muddy handprint smeared across the outside of the glass. I didn't know it then, but that wasn't the first time he'd been watching me. And before everything was over, I would discover that he'd already been inside my bedroom. My parents had moved to an isolated house in northern Pennsylvania about a year earlier. My dad had recently retired, and both of them wanted somewhere peaceful, far away from traffic and noisy neighbors. They found a 2-story house surrounded by thick woods at the end of a long, gravel driveway. The nearest neighbor was more than half a mile away, and at night there were no streetlights, almost no passing cars, and barely any cell reception. During the day, the property was beautiful. At night, it felt completely different. The trees became a black wall surrounding the house in every direction, and every sound seemed louder because there was nothing else around. I was 24 when I stayed with my parents while renovations were being completed at my apartment. The first few nights were normal. Then one Wednesday evening, my parents went to dinner with friends about 40 minutes away. I stayed behind because I had work to finish. Around 10 o'clock, I made popcorn, turned most of the downstairs lights off, and started watching a movie. About 20 minutes later, I noticed something strange. The crickets had stopped. If you've ever stayed deep in the woods, you know that nighttime is usually filled with noise. Crickets, frogs, wind moving through the trees. You stop noticing it after a while. But when all of it disappears at once, you notice immediately. I paused the television. For several seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then I heard a slow crunch outside, then another, then another. Footsteps were moving through the gravel beside the house. I told myself it was probably a deer. Then the footsteps stopped directly behind me. There's a large window behind the couch. During the day, it overlooked the backyard. At night, it became a black mirror. I stared at the television screen, afraid to turn around. That's when I noticed something pale reflected behind me. I turned, and there he was. The man was inches from the glass. He had messy dark hair, a thin face, and clothes that looked soaked and filthy. His cheeks were hollow, and his eyes looked almost too large in the darkness. But the worst part was the smile. He didn't look angry. He looked excited, like he'd been waiting for me to notice him. Then he raised his finger to his lips. I ran for the light. When I turned back, he had disappeared into the woods. I immediately called my dad. He told me to lock every door, stay inside, and call the police if the man returned. My parents came home about 30 minutes later. My dad grabbed a flashlight and walked around the property while my mother stayed inside with me. He didn't find anyone, but beneath the living room window, the ground was muddy from rain. There were fresh footprints leading from the woods to the window, stopping exactly where the man had been standing, then turning back toward the trees. The police came the next morning. One officer suggested it could have been a lost hiker, someone intoxicated, or possibly a homeless person living somewhere nearby. I remember staring at him and saying, "Lost hikers don't press their faces against people's windows." He didn't have an answer. The officers searched around the house but found nothing besides the footprints. Nothing happened the next night or the one after that. By Saturday, my parents were starting to think it had been a bizarre one-time incident. Then my mother found more footprints. She was watering plants near the side of the house when she saw several impressions in the soft dirt beneath her bedroom window. Then she found more beneath the kitchen window, and more beneath mine. Whoever had been outside hadn't only stood behind the living room window, he had circled the house, stopping beneath almost every window he could reach. My bedroom was upstairs, which meant he had even been studying the windows he couldn't look through. That night, my dad loaded the shotgun he kept locked in his office. For the next week, everything remained quiet. No footsteps, no faces at the windows, no strange noises. Eventually, my parents started relaxing. I couldn't. Every time I passed a window after dark, I looked at it. Every time a branch scraped the siding, my stomach tightened. 2 weeks later, my parents had to travel to Philadelphia for a wedding. They wanted me to go with them, but I had work. That meant I would be spending one night alone in the house. My dad didn't like the idea. Before leaving, he showed me where the shotgun was and reminded me how to use it. I laughed nervously and asked if he expected me to patrol the hallway all night. He didn't laugh. He simply said,
"If you hear anything, don't go outside."
Around midnight, I was lying in bed when something struck my bedroom window. Tap. My eyes opened. A few seconds passed. Tap. I sat up. My room was on the second floor. There is no balcony, and there were no tree branches close enough to touch the glass. Then it happened again. Tap. Something tiny bounced off the window and disappeared. A pebble. Someone was throwing rocks at my second-floor bedroom window. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way, but because of how isolated the house was, it could take time. I locked my bedroom door and tried to stay quiet. Then I heard 3 slow knocks downstairs. Knock, knock, knock. The sound came from the back door. The dispatcher told me to stay upstairs. I heard the doorknob turning slowly. Whoever was outside wasn't rushing. He wasn't trying to hide anymore. Then everything went silent. For several seconds, I heard nothing. Then there was a violent bang downstairs. Another bang followed. Then glass shattered. I grabbed the shotgun. I heard movement in the kitchen. The scrape of bumping metal. Then the back door opened. Someone stepped inside. I stood at the top of the stairs, holding the shotgun with both hands. The first floor was almost completely dark. I could hear footsteps moving through the kitchen. Slow, calm, unhurried. He was walking through the house like he knew exactly where he was going. Then he stepped into the hallway. It was him. The man from the window stood at the bottom of the stairs. His dark hair hung around his face, water dripping from his clothes. In one hand, he held a large knife. He looked up at me. "Don't come upstairs!" I shouted. He didn't move. I told him the police were coming. His head tilted slightly. Then he smiled. He placed one foot on the first stair. I raised the shotgun. "Stop!" He climbed another step. I fired into the wall beside him. The blast shook the house. He flinched, turned, and sprinted toward the kitchen. Seconds later, the back door slammed. By the time police arrived, he had disappeared into the woods. Officers searched the property with flashlights and dogs. They followed his trail for several hundred yards before losing it near a rocky creek. After that, my parents transformed the house. They installed cameras, motion lights, stronger locks, and an alarm system. My dad cleared away several trees near the property. Weeks passed, then months. The man never returned. At least that's what we thought. 3 months later, my mother found a large envelope in the mailbox. There's no return address and no writing on the outside. Inside were 12 photographs. The first showed my parents' house from deep in the woods. The second showed my mother gardening. Another showed my dad taking out the trash. One showed me walking toward my car. Another showed me sitting in the living room. The pictures had been taken on different days, from different locations around the property. Someone had been photographing us for weeks, maybe months. Then I reached the final photograph. It showed my bedroom. For a moment, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then I recognized the blankets. I was in the photograph. I was asleep. The picture had not been taken through the bedroom window. The angle was impossible. It had been taken from inside the room. Someone had stood only a few feet from my bed while I slept. My father called the police immediately. They searched the house again. They checked windows, locks, vents, and even the attic. They found no fingerprints, no hidden cameras, and nothing explaining how someone had entered without us knowing. My parents sold the house 6 months later. I eventually moved back into my apartment and tried to forget everything. For almost a year, nothing happened. I stopped checking behind me every time I entered my building. I stopped waking up whenever footsteps passed outside my door. I started convincing myself that whoever that man was, he had finally lost interest. Then last Friday, I came home and found an envelope pushed underneath my apartment door. There was no stamp, no address, which meant someone had personally carried it into my building. Inside was one photograph. It showed me entering my apartment the night before. The picture had been taken from across the street. On the back were 4 handwritten words. "You left without saying goodbye." I ran to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The street below was nearly empty. Then I saw him. He was standing beneath a streetlight half a block away, rain falling around him. Same thin body, same dark hair, same pale face. He was looking directly up at my window. I stepped backward and grabbed my phone. When I looked again, he was gone. Then someone knocked on my apartment door. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. My phone suddenly began vibrating. Unknown number. I answered without saying anything. For several seconds, there was only breathing. Then a man's voice whispered,
"You still don't remember me."
I stared at the door. The hallway outside was silent. Then the doorknob slowly began to turn, and just before the lock stopped, I heard him laughing on the other side.